Hello everybody and welcome back to RP-1. So today we're going to cut through it and just stop messing around. In the last few episodes I've been using stock parts and using rudimentary solutions to very technical problems. So as the title suggested, today we are going to build an F-104 Starship, which was one of the early X-plane programs, airplanes to go supersonic, which is what we're trying to do today. In all my test flights, I spent nearly 4.5 hours messing around with just the stock parts, the stock wings and whatnot. I was using procedural tanks and the appropriate engines, but I wasn't breaking past 400 meters per second. Well, about 435 was kind of like my top speed. And it was really disheartening because for the supersonic contract, you need to go 700 between 700 and 730 meters per second. And we just weren't achieving it no matter what we were doing. And I had stripped down the vehicle as much as possible. But ultimately, 4.5 hours worth of work down the drain, followed quickly by about half an hour's worth of research into what kind of planes were able to achieve supersonic flight, and came up with a few options, and I ultimately settled on this design. You see in the bottom left corner, we're going to just keep that up while we build, just to keep a reference. But yeah, about half an hour's worth of work led me to this, and I'll tell you how the test flights go momentarily, but ultimately I was back on track and utilizing my time more wisely than just trying to guess my way through a very complicated thing such as supersonic speed. It's just a good reminder that in RP-1 it is realistic progression and realism overhaul, and therefore it's best to rely on real world examples of what will work, because it is indeed rocket science. So it's not easy. This is definitely the more challenging playthrough of a Kerbal, or the more challenging mod of a Kerbal playthrough, and therefore requires a little bit more precision. And so that's why we're taking the time to really get our sizes right, our wings to look correctly, because those things matter. And in Ferrum aerospace research, the aerodynamics make a difference, so having different shaped wings will produce different outcomes. And if we want to try to replicate what already worked, we're going to need to replicate what already worked. So now we're going to work on what I find the most tedious and time-consuming of these procedural wing builds, and that is the control surfaces. But I feel like it pays off when you take the time to get these right, to line them up, to leave a very tiny gap in between them, make everything even. I feel like it really works in your favor, and the aerodynamics work a lot better. And sometimes you need to zoom in to see that you're just slightly off, just slightly out of line. And then so you can just kind of fine-tune and adjust everything, make sure it all fits. And now we're going to work on the tail fin, and I couldn't see from the picture, I couldn't make out the control surface and what it looked like, so I'm just going to assume that the entirety of the tail fin was the control surface handling the yaw, so we're just going to do that. Every time I readjust the positioning of it, it just likes to fall back into that default position of crank down. But nonetheless, using these little arrows to pull our way into the shape we want, we ultimately get the shape that we want. And so we're just going to lift that up a little bit. And then that's looking pretty good for the tail fin. The engine itself doesn't look exactly like it would like it does in the picture, but nonetheless, it is the actual same engine, which is the J79. And that was a crucial part of my research, is I wanted to make sure that not only did I get the shape right, but I actually used the same engine, because we do have access to those engines in RP-1. So we utilize the J79, and later we're going to take a look at the configurations of it. I didn't see the exact configurations. I didn't go that deep into the research, but did understand that having the right engine is half the battle. So it just goes to show that there's a lot of research to be done when playing this mod. It is, as I've often said, a game that gives you homework, and I think that's kind of funny. But you know, you learn a lot. You feel very gratified when you get things right. So yeah, like I mentioned, just fine-tuning the details of the control surfaces. I want to make sure, sometimes I have a tendency of not giving them enough surface area to do the lift. And I realized that I forgot to put all that together in symmetry mode, so that's what that was. And then after seeing them both together, I realized how I made my wings a little thicker. So now it is time for these little things on the end, as you see in the picture. I don't know if those were missiles or if they were fuel tanks, or just, if they were empty and just for balance or ballast or what have you. I didn't know, so I'm just going to take that they were fuel tanks, and I was going to fill them up accordingly. So now I'm building those little fins. From what I can tell, they're not control surfaces. They don't have any of that, so I'm just going to use the Supersonic wings, and then just make them visually correct as much as I can. And unfortunately, we can only mirror onto the opposite side of the craft, not the opposite side of this little missile looking thing, torpedo looking thing. So we're gonna have to do our best to kind of mirror it manually. I want to keep it thin and keep a low profile on it. It's not really meant to take up much space aerodynamically. As you see here, they're already kind of tilted upwards, which isn't great, so I'm just going to kind of manually tilt them down. And as you see there, it duplicated on the other side. So now we're going to fill all of those tanks, and we're going to make sure our control surfaces are set right. We're going to have those inner control surfaces be our flaps. We're going to put on some air brakes. We'll take those off later for some reason, but we'll get them back on before putting these out. Even though it wasn't part of the original design, we do have access to them, and it will help us ultimately in our mission. Time for the landing gear. I had no idea how the landing gear was designed. I was just going by some limited pictures. Maybe for future crafts, when I have to get a lot more technical, I'll see if I can find more technical diagrams and build a little more technically. So now we take our look at our FAR analysis. We do have one zone that is in the red. However, I'm not really sure where that affects, and so I'll have to look into that at some point. But for now, it's time to do a simulation. And it went good, but ultimately we didn't need as much fuel as we had. So we could drastically reduce the weight by reducing the amount of fuel. And then lastly, we're gonna use a more modern configuration of the J79 because we have the ability to. And that configuration was exactly what we needed to just smash this contract out of the water. And we're ready to go. We're taking off the quote attempt on our name and then turning it into the F-104 Starship. We're going to mark it as such. The decals, there was a lot more decals as you see in the picture. I wasn't going to try to do kind of like a one-for-one recreation of it. Just mainly I needed the style and shape of it in order to complete this contract. So for that, I was very thankful that we actually decided to take the time to do the work. And we're going to do that more often going forward. But anyways, that is the building of the F-104 Starship. So let's go ahead and clear up some room. We have quite a few crafts in our hangar. As you see, if we look into our integration, we have more than enough. That's just taking up room and fun. So we're going to actually scrap most of these. Basically any of the unnamed ones. Because all those jet planes and X-planes are already out of date and will not be able to be used in future contracts. So we leave the two chickens because, you know, they were fun. We'll leave them in the Airspace Museum. But all in all, that netted us about 16,000 funds. So that was pretty good to see. We're also pretty close to some of our orbital science, the rocketry and the solid engine, so I'm looking forward to that. As we come in here, we see in the last episode we did complete the early satellites heavy program. We still have the rest of the year into February of the following year worth of funds, and we could end this early and get a boost in reputation, but we actually have a decent amount of reputation right now, so I'm just going to keep the funds, and while we do these flights, keep getting paid for it. So we're getting Heidi Weber into the classroom, ready to prep for the Supersonic's flight contract. Extends her retirement another 15 days, which is nice to see. And then right towards the end of the evening, there's still enough light to fly by, so we go ahead and air launch her 425 kilometers away from the KSC. Pack her up a chute, because you never know. We'll go ahead and launch. So now I only did one test flight of this, and it performed very well, but just because it works in tests doesn't mean that it's a surefire thing. But nonetheless, our pilot is experienced, and our aircraft is capable. Glad to see that the engine fires up with no problem. We go ahead and get our atmospheric autopilot going. The cruise flight controller is what we're going to need for our contract because we're going to need to hold perfectly level. And while the standard flyby wire can do that, it can't specify which altitude we want, and so sometimes you have a tendency of dipping down a little bit. But more importantly is we have a speed control. We need to go between 700 and 725 as we looked from our contract just there. And by putting in the appropriate speed into this box here in the speed control, we can keep steady at that speed. We're going to put in 715 roughly between the middle of it, because if we were to put it at only 700, it would occasionally dip down below 700, which would then restart the timer, and that's no good. We need to keep at a steady speed between that. So I always like to put it somewhere in the middle between the two required speeds. Gorgeous. I need to stop flying at sunrise and start flying at sunset. It's nice. So as we see our speed ball, we are rapidly, as we see from our nav ball, we are rapidly approaching our target speed. Our engines are also heating up pretty concerningly, but we're going to push through that anyways and achieve the goal. So now we're at 707 meters per second. We're going to click on the speed control, and that will hold us somewhere between that. As you see here, it's not quite reaching 715, and so as you see here, if we were to put it at 700 as our speed control, it would rarely actually meet that goal. So now with 30 seconds left until the contract is complete, we're gonna stop time warp once it's done, and just like that, the contract is done. And see, look how easy it is when you build the plane correctly, when you build according to what works. It just works. And then about here, that's when I realized that we could have been running science that whole time, I thought we couldn't get it because we were below 40 kilometers, but apparently all we needed to do was just be going the speed. So we could have started that and had that running that entire time to gather science, but nonetheless, we're gonna take another flight with the F-104 and just solely focus on collecting all that science, because that will be very useful. Nonetheless, we're going to collect all we can on our way back to the runway and hopefully touch this down safely. I incorrectly choose how to point myself to the waypoint. Also, I incorrectly choose how to point myself to the heading. I realize I have to actually type it in here. I incorrectly input the wrong heading. I have to go back. It was the distance to the runway that I was looking at. The heading is actually 277.5 and rising. So now we can appropriately bank towards our target. And that is why atmospheric autopilot is such a great mod for any kind of flying playthrough if you're dealing with. And this is also available for stock Kerbal as well, so it's good to see. But anyways, our engine is heating up a little bit beyond what we'd like, so let's go ahead and kill that. We are close enough to the KSC that I feel like we can just kind of glide our way in. We're no longer going supersonic, so our science stopped. So all that is left is to come in. And I think I'm going to try it in IVA mode. It's been a little bit since we've landed a plane in IVA, especially using Ferrum Aerospace Research. It's a little more brutal that way. We are coming in pretty high though, and we're not at the right angle, so we're going to bank over to the right as we try to come in. I didn't plan on doing this in IVA, so I didn't set up any of the screens before we launched, but nonetheless, the screens don't have a lot of information for me right now that I can't just see using that little green screen in front of me or my own eyeballs. Flying against the sun is a little difficult. I can only imagine real pilots in real life with their real eyeballs and the real sun, how unfortunate that would be, but in our game, it's not too bad. With that sound, we decided to hop out of IVA and realized that we had ripped our wings off somehow. We had pitched too hard, or maybe, I know we used the right wing types, the Supersonic, so it shouldn't have had any problem, and they would have ripped off much earlier if we had used the wrong wings. So I'm not sure how they ripped off. I'm not sure what to do about that, and unfortunately we lost that entire plane. It's just going to smash up into pieces in the water, but Heidi Weber is safe and sound, and that is ultimately the most important thing. Our contract, however, does require us, unfortunately, to land the plane to recover that science. Not even the science, but basically the proof that we had gone that far, that fast, successfully and safely. So it's a good thing that we planned on doing another flight. It's a good thing that we built two planes at the same time. It's a good thing that we have two pilots, because we'll be able to rerun this mission in the next episode. And I think I'm going to spend a little more time doing some more research, because the high altitude contract has also been escaping me a little bit, and I wouldn't mind doing something that's been proven. Look at those lights, that reflection, that's just gorgeous. Anyways, that will be in the next episode. We'll be working on that. As you see here, we didn't complete that, unfortunately. So we're gonna go ahead and grab her and call this episode to a close. We've got a lot of science to gain. We've got new technology in our orbital rocketry programs, and in the next episode we're also going to pick which program we want to do next. I believe we have quite a few options: commercial satellites, other types of satellites, impactors. We could potentially send something to the moon. How to think about that. But all in all, I am very excited to see where we go from here. But anyway, that is where I'm going to leave today's episode. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're looking forward for more RP-1. If you did think about subscribing, drop me a like, let me know your thoughts, and I will see y'all in the next one. Take care.